I want you to think about the last time you felt behind. Not failing, not screwing up, just behind. Like everyone else got the memo and you missed it. Like there's some invisible scoreboard and you're losing, but you don't even know what game you're playing. Here's what's wild. You can be doing objectively well, you've got a job, you're paying your bills, you're not a mess, but you still feel like this constant low pressure that says, yeah, but you should be further along by now. You know what I'm saying? Further along from what? Nobody knows, but your brain brings it up anyway. I hate that. And here's the thing. That feeling isn't coming from you. It's coming from comparison. Comparison has hijacked your internal scoreboard. And it's one of the most dangerous things that can happen to a man. Because when you're constantly comparing yourself to others, you lose touch with your own progress. You lose clarity. You lose direction. And eventually you just lose yourself. So today we're talking about why comparison is killing your clarity. All right. Why you feel behind even when you're doing everything right, and how to break the cycle. Raise your hand if you've been there. Because here's the truth. You are not behind, brother. You're just measuring yourself against the wrong people. So let's talk about it. All right, let's start with the obvious question. Why does comparison feel so automatic? Because it is, brother. Comparison is hardwired into your brain. And it's how humans have always assessed safety and belonging. For most of human history, you compared yourself to maybe 10 people, your family, your neighbors, the guys you worked with. I think that would probably be about it. And that comparison was useful. It helped you figure out where you stood in the tribe. It helped you know if you were pulling your weight. It helped you survive. But here's the problem. Your brain hasn't evolved to handle the modern world yet. Now, before you'd even have your coffee, you've seen a 24-year-old with a supercar, a guy claiming he makes 7 figures working 4 hours a week, some dude with abs that look like they were carved by Michelangelo himself. We get it. And at no point does your brain go, oh, cool, that's probably exaggerated, filtered, or staged, or missing context. No. Your brain goes, why don't I look like that? Why am I not there yet? Why am I doing something wrong? And just like that, you're in comparison trap. Here's what makes this so dangerous, okay? Your brain doesn't distinguish between real and comparison and curated comparison. You see the difference here? When you see someone's highlight reel on Instagram, your nervous system registers it the same way it would if you were standing next to them in real life. That's a fact, all right? So you're not just comparing yourself to your actual peers anymore. You're comparing yourself to the 0.01% of people on the planet, and you're doing it 100 times a day, and now it's just become normal. That's not a fair fight. That's not even a real fight. But your brain does that anyways. It doesn't know any difference. There's research on this, okay? Studies show that constant exposure to curated success literally distorts your perception of progress. Not because you're weak, not because you're jealous, but because your brain is trying to make sense of information it was never designed to process. And when your brain can't make sense of something, it defaults to threat mode. It assumes you're falling behind. It assumes you're not good enough. It assumes you need to work harder, move faster, and do more. But here's the thing. You're actually not behind. You're just overwhelmed by data that has nothing to do with your life, okay? And that's where men get stuck because you feel behind, you don't slow down, you speed up. You work harder, you push more, you skip reset, you ignore the signals because somewhere along the way we were taught that pressure means progress. Pressure without clarity just creates chaos, my friend. Here's something nobody's talking about, okay? Most men aren't just comparing themselves to other people. They're comparing themselves to invisible timelines. Timelines that don't even exist. You know what I'm talking about. The idea that by 25, you should have your career figured out. By 30, you should be married. By 35, you should own a house. By 40, you should be financially secure, so on and so on. Who decided that? It's just something we absorb from culture, from our parents, from movies, from social media. And now you're walking around with this invisible checklist in your head, and every time you don't hit one of those milestones, you feel like you're failing. But here's the truth. Those timelines are arbitrary. They're not based on your life. They're not based on your circumstances. They're not based on what you actually want. They're just there, floating around in your subconscious, making you feel like you're late to the party that you never even wanted to go to. I felt this. I remember hitting 30 and thinking, I should have more figured out by now. And when I really examined that thought, I realized I didn't even know what more meant. More money, more status, more stability. I don't know. I just knew I felt behind. And that's the trap, okay? You're not behind. You're just holding yourself to a standard that was never yours to begin with. There's another layer to this. You're not just comparing yourself to where you think you should be. You're comparing yourself to where other people are. And here's the problem with that. You're comparing your behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel. You see your friend buys a house and you think, I should have a house by now. But you don't see the debt. You don't see the stress. You don't see the fact that they hate their job but can't quit because of their mortgage. This goes the same with people who own businesses and whatnot, which are great. I love that. I do it. But they don't see the stress that goes behind it. They just automatically think, oh, it must be a nice life. Good for you. It's not the case. You also see someone get promoted and you think the same thing. I should be further along in my career. But you don't see the 60-hour work weeks. You don't see the burnout. You don't see the fact that they're miserable but too afraid to admit it. You're comparing timelines without context, and that's a guaranteed way to always feel behind, okay? Because you're not comparing apples to apples. You're comparing your full reality to someone else's curated snapshot, and that's not fair to you. Here's the hard truth, okay? There's no universal timeline. There's no age where you're supposed to have it all figured out. Okay? And anyone who pretends otherwise is either selling something or compensating for something else. Man, it's usually both. So why does comparison kill clarity, you ask? Because clarity comes from knowing what you want. And comparison makes you forget. When you're constantly looking at what other people have, you stop asking yourself what you actually want. You start chasing things because they look impressive, not because they align with who you are. You want the promotion because your friend got one. You want the house because everyone else is buying one. You want the relationship because you feel like you're supposed to have one by now. But none of that is yours. It's just noise, pure noise. And the more chase that you have, things that aren't actually yours, you keep chasing that, right? The more disconnected you become. Because deep down, your body knows this. Your nervous system knows this. You're not aligned. You're out of the flow, buddy. And misalignment creates friction. And friction creates fatigue. Fatigue creates burnout. You see where this is going? So if you're feeling tired for no reason, if you're feeling restless even though you're doing everything right, this might be why. You're not lazy. You're not undisciplined. You're just chasing someone else's definition of success. I'm going to keep saying it over and over again. Here's another thing. Comparison makes you focus on the wrong metrics. Instead of asking, am I growing? Am I aligned? Am I building something that feels true to me? You start asking, am I far along as that guy? Do I have as much as him? Do I look as successful? And those questions will never lead to fulfillment because there's always someone further along. It'll always be that way, okay? There's always someone with more. There's always someone who looks more successful, period. Even in my own eyes. External metrics are infinite. You can never win that game. But eternal ones, those are yours. Nobody can take that from you. Nobody can compete with them. You just have to realize it, man. When you're oriented internally, you stop comparing yourself to everyone else because you're not playing their game, you're playing yours. That's when things start to feel different. There's research on this, okay? Studies show that men who define success internally based on alignment, integrity, connection, report lower stress and have higher self-satisfaction than men who define success externally based on money, status, achievement. Why? Because internal success is sustainable. External success is a moving target. You can always make more money. You can always achieve more. You can always look more impressive, but you can't always feel more aligned. You can't always feel more at peace. You can't always feel more like yourself. And that's what actually matters. Don't let the ego get in place of that, okay? So how do you actually break this comparison cycle? Well, it ain't easy, my friend, because comparison is automatic. It's hardwired, brother. You can't just turn it off, but you can redirect it. It's to stop consuming other people's highlight reels, okay? I'm not saying delete social media at all. I'm not saying go live in a cave, but I am saying you need to be intentional about what you're consuming, and that's easier said than done. If you're following people who make you feel behind, unfollow them. Just do it right now. Unclick. If you're scrolling through feeds that make you feel inadequate, then stop. That might be the harder part. Your mental diet matters just as much as your physical diet. And if you're feeding your brain comparisons all day long, you're going to feel way behind. So step 2 is to define your own metrics, okay? Stop using other people's scoreboard. Build your own. What actually matters to you, not what you think should matter, not what society says should matter, what actually matters to you. Maybe it's not money. Maybe it's freedom. Maybe it's not status. Maybe it's peace. Maybe it's not achievement. Maybe it's alignment. Whatever it is, write it down, make it clear, and start measuring yourself against that. Because when you have your own metrics, comparison loses its power. You're not playing their game anymore. You're playing yours. And step 3 is to remember, Step 3 is to remember that everyone is on a different timeline. Gosh, I think I had too much coffee. You don't know what someone else has been through. You don't know what they've sacrificed. You don't know what they're dealing with behind the scenes, and that's the truth. So stop comparing your chapter 3 to someone else's chapter 20. Stop comparing your starting line to someone else's finish line. You're not behind, you're just on a different path. Again, I'm going to say it. You're not behind, you're just on a different path. And that's okay. So here's the bottom line. Comparison is one of the biggest killers of clarity. It hijacks your internal scoreboard. It makes you chase things that aren't yours. It makes you feel behind even when you're not. But here's the good news, amigo. You can break the cycle today. Stop consuming other people's highlight reels. Define your own metrics. Remember that everyone else is on their own timeline. It don't matter to you. And most importantly, stop measuring yourself against strangers. Start measuring yourself against who you were yesterday, because that's the only comparison that actually matters. It's you. Next time, we're going to talk about why most men are dumb. Why most men are numb. Don't even know it. Shit, they might be dumb anyways. And also why emotional shutdown feels like strength, but it's actually a trap. And how to start feeling again without failing apart. Because numbness is one of the most dangerous states a man can be in. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Remember, you're driven by purpose and you're built for legacy. Let's go.